Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Serpent's Secret, written by Sayantani Dasgupta. Today we are reading chapter 20. We only have about 1/3 of the book left. Last time in chapter 19, Neil was in trouble. He is being squeezed by a snake right now. The plan is not quite working the way I think he wanted it to work. So we'll see in chapter 20 to see if Princess Kieran can save him. Now, throughout chapter 20, I'm going to point out a few vocabulary words that show up. They're great words the author chose to use. However, I want you to think about context. That means to think about what's happening in that moment in the story to see if you can figure out what that word means in that sentence or in that paragraph. So I'll point them out as we read and see if you can build your vocabulary knowledge too. Here we go. Save him, Toonie yelled. How am I going to break it to the Raja if the prince dies? Neil's plan was based on the fact that pythons aren't poisonous, that they squeeze their prey to death. And he figured as a half demon, he should be able to withstand a little squeezing until I nabbed the jewel. Problem was, neither of us calculated the silt floor. Hi, cat. I struggled to move, but every step was such an effort. Neil was wrestling with the enormous serpent. Muscles of steel or not, how much longer could he stand this monstrous snake? There was no way I could reach the jewel in time. Okay, this was not a good plan. Time for a new one. In the struggle, the python's tail flailed around the room. Ooh, there's a good word. Flailed. So think about the context. What's happening right now? In the struggle, the python's tail flailed around the room. What do you think the word flailed might mean? Use what you're imagining to help you figure that out. It landed with a thump next to the spot where I was struggling with the cloying ground. I made a split-second decision, now or never. I jumped with both feet onto the python's tail. Feeling my weight, the snake lifted up the back of its body, trying to dislodge me. But I just laid down and slid down the snake's body as if it was a huge slide. It was rough and slimy and scaly on my skin. Ugh, but much easier than running through that muddy quicksand on the floor. I landed with a thump about midway up the giant serpent's body, and trying to imagine I was doing nothing scary than just riding Snowy. I hung on for dear life with my thigh muscles. I reached back to my quiver and chose one of the special arrows that Neil had made me prepare before we left his kingdom. He showed me how to attach a long, thin rope made of super strong 13 Rivers material to some of my arrows. At the time, I couldn't figure out what I would need them for, but now I was glad. My fingers were slippery with sweat as I fumbled with the bow a little. The snake was bucking and writhing underneath me, and it was not easy to concentrate. Ooh, another good word, writhing. This is what it looks like here. Writhing. What do you think writhing might mean? So try to again use context. She's on the snake. She's grabbing onto it. What's the snake doing knowing that Kieran is on top of this itself? The snake was bucking and writhing underneath me. So use context. Think about what's happening to see if you can figure out what writhing means. The snake was writhing underneath Kieran. Take your time there, princess, Neil gasped as from somewhere within the python's coils. He was turning a shade of purple. Hold on to your pants, cowboy. I finally managed to knock the arrow onto my bow. My stomach churned as I rode the thrashing snake, and I could only hope that there wouldn't be a repeat of the famous corn dog barf incident from before. Neil's life was depending on my archery skills. No pressure or anything. My hand shaking, I shot the arrow straight up above the snake's head into the ceiling. Would the arrowhead be strong enough to pierce the stone? Yes, bingo! It went in, leaving the rope dangling behind it like a comet's tail. Sorry. I didn't even have time to test it to see if it will hold my weight. I just used it like mountain climbing gear to clamber up the rest of the snake's slithery body to the top of its head. All right, there's my last word for you. Clamber. It looks like this. It looks like clam-ber, but it's pronounced clamber. So again, use context. Can you figure out what this word means by imagining what's happening in that moment? I just used it like mountain climbing gear to clamber up the rest of the snake's slimy body. Did you figure it out? Okay, I can't wait to hear what you say in the comments below. Show off! Neil choked out. Even with me climbing all over its body, the snake had not stopped squeezing. Go, princess! Go, princess! Tuntuni chanted. Remind me to thank you for the arrows after I save you, I shouted to Neil. I was straddling the snake's head now, trying to stab it. But just as its skin had been too tough for Neil's sword, my arrows couldn't make a dent. I grabbed the dangling rope of the arrow still stuck in the ceiling and made a quick loop, which I slipped over the snake's neck. It held. The snake hissed and thrashed around. In the process, it actually dropped Neil. He fell with a thump on the soft earth. Go, go, go! I shouted at Neil. I didn't even bother to see if he was all right. How long would one magical rope hold this massive, super strong snake? I shot an arrow into another part of the ceiling, making another noose out of the dangling rope and looping it over the snake's head. I kept going like that, shooting an arrow into the ceiling, grabbing the rope, threading it under the snake's chin, and then starting all over again. In this way, I tied the snake with a halo of ropes, each attached by a different arrow, into the stone ceiling. One huge bonus of all the ropes was that the snake couldn't move its head as much, which was a relief because I was sitting astride its neck and I could feel my breakfast in my throat. Of course, it didn't last long. The snake's muscular body bunched and swayed as if it tried to free itself, or at least ditch me onto the floor. Snakey's in terrible mess, Tuntuni sang, sewn up by a royal seamstress. It was like being on one of those bucking bronco rides at a cheesy Western-themed restaurant. You know, the rides where they you ride on the little, the cow or the bull and the mechanical bull, and it switches, it moves you around a lot. So she's trying to hold on. The snake bumped up and down, left and right, trying to shake off the ropes that pinned it to the ceiling. Oh no. The ropes actually started to give way. Pop! The snake managed to yank one of my arrows from the ceiling. The weapon dangled, harmless from the rope still around the serpent's neck. Hurry, Neil! I yelled. I don't know how long these things are going to hold it. Pop! Another arrow gone. Neil struggled through the mud over to the python jewel. Being Mr. Demonic Dude, it was a lot easier for him than it had been for me. But even still, would he make it there in time? The python had yanked out 2 of my arrows from the ceiling. I felt back towards my quiver. I had only 1 roped arrow left. Did I want to use it? Would it make a difference? I threaded it to my bow, aiming it at the ceiling. Pop, pop, pop! The snake was almost free of all the ropes now. In the meantime, Neil reached the jewel. Rather than just picking it up and running, as had been our original plan, he kicked mud from the cavern floor over the jewel's shining surface. As he kept doing that, the room darkened. My heart started to speed up. I found the courage from who knows where to ride an enchanted snake like it was some kind of horse, but there was no way I could face doing that in the dark. If I had the energy, I would have yelled at Neil to stop, but all I could do at this point was hold on to that thrashing serpent. In the graying light, I saw Neil bury the hilt of his sword deep into the mud in front of the jewel, its point holding up. He shouted, On my count, do a Tarzan! A Tarzan? 1, 2... Oh, right, a Tarzan. Do you know what he means by a Tarzan? If you've ever seen the movie or if you've heard of the character, Tarzan is a character who lives in the jungle and he would swing across vines. So I'm guessing that might be what Neil is telling Kieran to do a Tarzan, to swing across maybe the ceiling or the air using possibly the ropes dangling? Right, a Tarzan. Underneath me, the python tore the last rope out of the ceiling. The ropes and the arrows hung from its neck like some kind of weird necklace, but they certainly weren't doing anything to slow it down. I shot my last arrow into the ceiling and hoisted myself up the rope and off the snake. It took all my remaining strength. I hung there, 30 feet off the ground, my muscles trembling. 3, and with that, Neil kicked a clump of mud over the last part of the jewel, dousing its light. The cavern was now inky black, the darkness filled with the rancid smell of snake. Ooh, okay, that should be our last word. Rancid. The darkness was filled with the rancid smell of snake. What do you think the word rancid might mean? So think about it. Think about what's happening, the context, what's going on right now in the book. and see if you can figure out what rancid might mean. The darkness was filled with the rancid smell of snake. Or it might have been the smell of my own fear. I started panicking, squeezing my eyes shut so hard I could see stars, but at least it was a familiar darkness. My hands were so sweaty. I was slipping down the rope now. For the zillionth time in the last few days, I was going to plummet to my death. Then I heard Neil's voice cutting through the darkness. "Hey, Slimeball, where's your precious python jewel?" The serpent hissed and slithered away from me. I heard it move to the other side of the cave. My grip was slipping, but I desperately hung on. I didn't want to die. I wanted to see my parents again. I wanted to hang out with my friend Zuzu. I even wanted to argue with Neil again. Then the cavern was filled with a wailing as the snake, searching for its jewel, found instead the point of Neil's sword. Its cries were horrible, high-pitched and almost human. There was a thrashing sound like a giant drum being beaten on the ground. And in a few minutes, all was silent. As quickly as there had been darkness, there was light again. Neil had cleaned some of the dirt from the jewel's surface, allowing it to shine once more like an unnatural underground sun. I'd never been so happy to see it. The python's giant body lay still, oozing dark blood on the floor. Trying to reach its jewel, it had split itself in two on Neil's sword. Neither of us had been strong enough to harm it, but it was strong enough to kill itself. I breathed a long sigh of relief and slid down my rope. Unfortunately, it stopped what felt like a billion miles too short of the ground. Oh, for Pete's sake. So Neil, now holding the jewel, was standing under me where it hung. "Let go, I'll get you," he said. I shook my head. "Come on," Neil said. "You got to trust me. Like it or not, we're in this together." Did I trust Neil? It was hard to say. One moment I felt like strangling him, and the next moment we were saving each other's lives. At the very least, until we rescued our families, we were partners, and I guess that deserved my trust. I suppose we half monsters have to stick together, right? We had a lot in common, Neil and I, even if I didn't like to admit it. So I let go. It wasn't like one of those scenes in the movies where the princess falls into the hero's arms. It was more like me plummeting down onto the cartoon character's head. I felt like, a graceful barbell. They both sank further into the mud. "You did ask for it." I swiped some mud off my face. "Yeah," Neil said. "I guess I did." Unfortunately, the muddy moment was shattered by the sound of a terrible hissing that sent shivers up my spine, way worse than any darkness. "Welcome home, sister," 7 voices hissed at me. And that's the end. I hope you enjoyed that chapter, and I hope you had some fun practicing how to use context to figure out what words mean. All right, I'll see you in the next chapter. Bye.